All right, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. And you know who I am. I'm Dr. Maisha, but today, I have a guest on who it has been a long time coming. We have been trying to do this for some time. And when two people are living big lives, sometimes it can be challenging to coordinate those schedules, but we did it. This doctor, she is a friend. She's a colleague, of course, but she is a friend. She is someone who I look up to. In fact, this doctor, Dr. Catherine Toomer, inspired me to get on the TEDx stage. So I am so excited. I mean, we have a lot to talk about, and today we're focusing on weight health. Dr. Catherine Toomer, she is the owner of Total Weight Care Institute. And she is just an amazing woman. She provides complete and compassionate weight care to those who are on the verge of giving up on their health. And she teaches physicians and their mid levels how to do the same in their practices. So, she's a boss. She is a boss. And I am so excited to have you here, Dr. Catherine. How are you?
I am well, although I don't know. Can I live up to that? I'll see.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So glad to finally be doing this episode with you.
So,
I know you,
mhm,
and there may be some people who are listening who know who you are as well, because,
mhm.
well, I mean, you've got a whole show, the Catherine Toomer Show, with blackdoctor.org, correct? But for those who may be just getting to know you, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your journey, even.
Okay. Well, as you said, my name is Dr. Catherine Toomer. I am a family medicine and community health physician and founded uh, Total Weight Care Institute. And essentially, what Total Weight Care Institute is where I can provide the care I needed when I was 100 pounds overweight and couldn't find someone who could help me. I found people who would shame me, but not to
Mhm.
help. And so I decided to become the doctor that other people needed. And now I train doctors that other people need because it's still happening. So what I've done is I've taken a program that I created for myself
Mhm.
when I was a type 2 diabetic, 100 pounds overweight, and then went into congestive heart failure
Mhm.
after the birth of my last daughter. And I just couldn't get help. I was
Mhm.
too high risk to anyone who I thought could help me. And so I created my own program and I've been using that program ever since to help other people.
Mhm.
And part of that program is very much based in my training and in my education of biopsychosocial approach to
Mhm.
any transformation of a person. And so, the biology we generally are really good as doctors to cover and we know what's going on. But
Yeah.
the psychosocial is really where the true transformation happens. And that's where I tend to spend a lot of my time.
That's so important. And I think, this is what I love about what you do is it is very much holistic in nature. And the part that most people miss, which is that psychosocial, aspect of it, that is the part that is always sort of left in the background,
Mhm.
right? Not paid under attended to.
Yes.
And so, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about, how that factors in to our weight health in general.
Well, like I always say, not all the weight we need to lose is in pounds. And not all that weight we need to lose is in our pounds. Sometimes it's in somebody else that we need to get. So there's that. But essentially, what I do is I look at all the reasons that contribute to why a person is where they are. And so when it comes to the psychosocial, we know that the psychology and how we feel and how what we think affects what we do. It affects our
Mhm.
filters. It affects how we present to the world, how the world presents to us.
Yeah.
And all of those things get manifested physically. And when
Mhm.
they're manifested physically, it often manifests in either weight loss or weight gain. So
Mhm.
focusing on weight health just gives me the opportunity to look for those reasons.
Yeah.
Weight is a symptom, it's a
Mhm.
side effect of something else. And so I can always look for that. And when it comes to the social part, because stress is such a huge component in how our body processes food that we eat, that when we're under stress, our body changes. It
Mhm.
changes what we do. Our body takes food and turns it into fat rather than to fuel. It's impossible to, I should say, let me rephrase that. It is necessary to pay attention to all of those things in order to make sure that the person has success, not just at that moment, but for lifelong.
I love that. It's so powerful what you're sharing here. One of the things that came to mind as you were talking about not all the weight that we need to lose is in pounds, and not all the weight is our weight, or not all the pounds
Mhm,
are our pounds.
mhm,
It reminds me of like how we experience the world. Like if you just look at what's going on in the world and how there's so much trauma in the world. And then if you top that
mhm.
onto what the personal experience is and what the childhood trauma might be, weight is a symptom. It is
Yes.
so powerful. And
Mhm,
so looking at, well, if weight is a symptom, what is the cause? What is the root cause of that symptom? And then identifying all, I love you said, I love that you said, you look at what are all the causes.
mhm,
And so that it just it's a powerful place to stand when you're looking at your weight, is what are all what is this a symptom of
mhm.
specifically?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. And before we continue, I just want you to point out something I did that you actually taught me. You saw how I switched my language from the
I
negative to the positive.
noticed
That
that.
is something actually I learned from you, to really pay attention to the language that I use when speaking about anything really, but
Yeah.
particularly around this when you're talking about the psychosocial approach to any type of issue, especially in a place where people often internalize a lot of the blame and shame that is thrown at them
Mhm,
throughout their lives. It's
mhm.
very important to stay in the positive. I That is something that you taught me very well.
I appreciate that acknowledgement, but yeah, I noticed that. I was like, "Ooh, nice reframe in the moment."
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I love that you said, we have to focus on the positive, because when we think about weight, a lot of times we're talking about losing weight.
Mhm.
And we're focused on what we don't want rather than what we're going to. And so I
Mhm.
love even the way you language weight health, because it's toward what people are looking for. They're looking for that weight health, whatever that might look like for them.
Mhm.
And then they can create a visual representation, or an internal representation of what that looks, sounds, and feels like.
And care is another. I like the word weight care, and mainly
Mhm.
because we don't weight has lots of meanings,
Mhm.
and sometimes, like you said, it's not always in pounds. So,
Mhm.
if someone is being weighed down by something,
Yes.
we help lift it. If something is some of it is a weight as in WAIT, being patient is a huge part of the
Mhm.
process. And
Mhm.
having realistic expectations. When we've been told that our being overweight or being obese or having any part of physical difference that people feel is unattractive or
Mhm.
unnecessary or just doesn't fit into what society says is normal, we internalize it and we think it's our fault. It's our behavior.
Mhm.
It's everything about us. Sometimes just removing that responsibility, removing the idea that it's something we've done to ourselves rather than something we can give to ourselves is
Mhm.
really important. Patience and empowerment are 2 huge, components of what I do, but it's
Mhm.
also very important for lifelong and long-term success, and
Yeah.
it's also where I need to help people shore up their defense mechanisms,
Yeah.
because often what happens in society, like, the social part of the psychosocial, is that people feed off of the low self-esteem that we have created or that
Mm.
we have
Yeah.
because of what society has told us that we're not important.
Yeah.
Thinness is considered a currency in this society. So if you're
Mhm.
not thin, then somehow you're worthless. And
Mhm.
when we internalize that, there are people who take advantage of that internalization. So when we come
Absolutely.
out of that, those are often the first people who give us grief or
Yeah.
who are resistant or who try to sabotage our processes.
Mhm.
And so paying attention to the psychosocial doesn't only help the person speak to themselves in the way that they should, but
Mhm.
also help gives them the language to speak to others so that they can maintain their success.
It's like you read my mind. It's like we're so in rapport, that we're so connected, because that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. Like,
Mm,
I imagine Given social media, given the not just online social media, but media from television, radio, all media, there is a conditioning around what weight should be,
Mm,
and I imagine it can be challenging um, in the beginning for
mhm.
some to be focusing themselves on weight care, but then go out into the world and see all of these, sort of subconscious suggestions. And so I wonder, what is the way that you build that resilience, high level? What is the way that you build that resilience in your clients
Mhm.
of, okay, well, now you've got this internal, you got this new internal representation, and there's the world.
So the way I do that is by removing numbers. I try to remove the focus from any number and then try to use other scales to measure
Mm,
success.
yeah.
We often use the term non-scale victories. It's a common term, but really what we're doing is using a different scale
Mhm,
to assigned to those victories.
mhm,
And so if rather than it being watching numbers going down a scale, which are very arbitrary and it
mhm,
can fluctuate and
mhm.
it doesn't, you drink extra water that day, you actually have done something healthy and your weight will go up. You
Right,
work out and build muscle, the weight, that number on a scale may go up. So the number does not indicate health at
right.
all.
That's right.
And so what I do often is have people focus on other things. Reframing is huge part
Mhm.
of this, as well as understanding that teach people to pay attention to the other signs.
Yeah.
How are you getting along with people that you weren't getting along with before? All of a sudden, you're getting
Mhm,
along better,
mhm,
or you're sleeping better.
mhm.
The things that used to trigger you before suddenly don't trigger you anymore.
Yeah.
Or, you can walk farther than you used to before. And you
Mhm,
had noticed you stopped taking the elevator and you walk up the stairs when
mhm,
before your knees hurt too much or your back hurt too much to do that, or you're too
mhm.
winded by the time you got to your desk that it didn't make sense. Those type of things, just refocusing on the benefits, how they manifest is really, really important. And that's the best way of shifting the mindset from the number on a scale being the most important thing to then how is this manifesting as health in other ways.
Yeah, yeah. I think also, just to plus one on that, to add to that, I think it's important for people to understand that the numbers or even the image that is out there of what health looks like is not an image that's, how do I say this? Given the social justice work that I do,
Mhm.
is created by a certain structure and is
Yes.
created by a certain group of people,
Mhm.
and it's not representative of all people.
Mhm.
So, like, for example, people are always there's always on Instagram, like, the super thin yogi with the super flat stomach, and I'm a yogi of 17 years and I don't look like that. But one of the things I'm starting to see is that inclusiveness
Yes.
inside of yoga, where you're seeing all body types,
Mhm.
right? And so, whereas in one group of people, health or thinness or prettiness, attractiveness looks one way, if you're to go to Africa, if you go to the Middle East,
Mhm.
that little pouch is sexy for
Yes.
another,
Yes.
for another culture.
Mhm.
So bringing context to what healthy weight looks like and understanding that that standard has
Mhm.
not been set for everyone. That
Mhm.
standard has been set by a certain group of people in an oppressive culture. And
Mhm.
when you have that context and you understand it, then I need, at least for myself and for some of the people that I've worked with, it kind of frees you
Mhm.
from the confines of, oh, I have to be with it, look like this or within this weight in
Mhm.
order to be healthy. Then it helps to refocus on a lot of these other scale measures that you were just mentioning. So I love that you shared that.
Thank you. You know what? A healthy weight is any weight that you can accept your
Mm,
body being,
mhm,
no
mm,
matter what it says on a scale.
mhm,
If you cannot accept, or if you do not accept that it's maladaptive when we look at ourselves and say, "This is wrong, that is wrong, this is" you know you are at a healthy weight when you can look at your body no matter where you are and say, "Look, and I love what I'm looking at."
Yeah.
That is healthy weight. And that's why I tend not to focus on numbers because it really
Mhm.
has nothing to do with the number, it has to do with how we look at ourselves.
Mhm.
And how we look at ourselves, we do have a lot imposed on us societally, and it is very much culturally based, and it's
Mhm.
not always our culture that we
Right.
get those messages.
Mhm.
However, there are ways that we can counter that, and partly it starts with what we tell ourselves about
That's right.
ourselves.
Mhm. I love it. I love it. Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that when we begin to tell when we begin to find the lies that we may have been telling ourselves about
Mhm.
ourselves
Yeah.
and recognize them as such, then we can dissolve them away
Yes.
and replace them with the new things.
Mhm.
And then it dissolves the shame. I mean, you
Yes.
talked about this earlier, like the shaming, right? That
Mhm.
happens. But what happens is that shame becomes internalized.
Yes.
And so we can begin to dissolve that shame. And that's what I love about the work that you do is it's not focused solely on the scale. It's not focused solely on this outward physical appearance. It's focused on how are you viewing yourself so that you can actually be empowered in your skin and be comfortable in your
Mhm.
own skin?
Yes.
I think that's at the end of the day where we derive the most power. And it's something that I think not only, so, I say how we do anything is how we do everything.
Mhm.
So when we are empowered in ourselves, then like you said, we're going to get along. We're going to interact with people differently. We're
Yes.
going to be more confident. We're going to stand in our own value
Mhm.
when we're in our jobs, when we're in our leadership position. We're going to be coming from a whole different place. So while we talk about weight and health and care, this is about life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And how we move in life.
Mhm.
And weight is just one little
Thing.
itsy bitsy part of
Mhm.
it. And I think what you in essence, what you're doing is taking this thing that feels gargantuan to people and putting it in its rightful context
Mhm.
so that people can really live their lives powerfully.
Yeah. And honestly, the reason I even tack weight into what I do, because my original business was health, wellness, and weight loss in that order,
Mhm,
is only because so much of what happens to us internally, externally, and imposed manifests as a change in weight. And
mhm,
so that's what people notice. So by having them come to me for what they notice gives
mhm.
me the opportunity to address what's true and
That's
what's
right. Oof,
really going on.
I love it.
And that's why and then some of it is but what that does sometimes is you have to have this balance of this kind of necessary evil
Mhm.
because I want to help as many people as I can, and before someone works with me, their focus still is on their size and still
Yeah.
is a number on a scale.
Mhm,
And so I use that really as a lure.
mhm.
And then once in and I always say bait and switch because, but often what happens is that people stop caring.
Yeah.
They absolutely stop caring. I know when people's like, how do you measure your success? It's not by how much weight someone's lost when it's on a number on a scale, but
Mhm.
their attitude about themselves and their attitude about where they are in their process. And suddenly, everything changes.
Yeah.
Their focus changes.
Yeah.
The level and myself included. I
Mhm,
mean, when I started, I was like, I need to lose this weight. I need to lose this weight. I need to lose this weight. And, my husband at the time, well, he's still my husband, but he's also a physician, and he said, "No, what you need to do is get your diabetes under control."
mm,
And I was like, "Well, yeah, but," and then, of course, I got my diabetes under control. My weight immediately followed.
mhm.
And so even for me, it took some shift.
Yeah.
It took a shift, and also understanding how much, my mental state played into it.
Mhm,
Motivation and depression are just connected.
mhm,
And, at the time I had a cardiac disease, so I had the cardiac depression.
mhm,
I already had some low level chronic depression from med school and residency, and then I just
mhm.
had a baby, so I postpartum.
Oh,
And so trying to get healthy without addressing the psychology of what was going on at the time was impossible. And so
Right.
I treated my depression first.
Mhm.
Then I was able to have the energy to do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I wouldn't even it's interesting because you said earlier, the bait and switch. I wouldn't even call it that. I would call it speaking into someone's values,
Yeah.
entering their model of the world, right?
Mhm.
Because what's important to them at the time is what's gonna motivate them.
Mhm.
Speaking of
Yeah.
motivation, and if what's important to them at that time is weight, and then what you do is then go and work your magic.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna call it magic.
Okay.
But it is like, have them do the work, work with them in the way you work with them, and to the point where it doesn't become the focus, right?
Yeah.
I really love that. And it does take a shift. It does take work. Whenever I'm doing timeline therapy with people, whenever I'm doing the work that I do with people, I always tell
Mhm.
them, look, I ain't no magician.
Yeah.
You about to do some brain work. Let's be
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
This works because you're doing the work. I
Mhm.
am the guide. I know what to say, I know where to put you,
Mhm.
but it only gonna work if you're committed to the work,
Mhm.
and you're gonna be tired at the end of the session. That's gonna
Yes.
be and people
Oh, yeah.
I have laughing because I'm like, "You're gonna be tired, you're gonna wanna
Yeah.
take a nap, but you may not like me some of the time, but you're
Yeah.
gonna love me at the end,"
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's people have to understand, yeah, there is a shift
Yeah.
that happens,
Mhm.
but when you're willing to take it on,
Mhm.
then, that shift, then you're committed to the shift. You're committed to letting
Mhm.
go of the mental weight and the
Yes.
emotional weight that you
Mhm.
need to let go of, and putting the focus on something different and allowing the weight to actually, to actually follow. And
Yes.
there's something else that you said that is reminding me of, like, we talked about the stress, the mental well-being and the mental health piece.
Mhm.
The thing that I was thinking is how connected to, our mental health is to, like, our cortisol production
Mhm.
and
Oh, yeah.
our neurotransmitter, and so, like, thinking of it this way, like, the more you're stressed out, the less you sleep, the more that cortisol stays up and then
Mhm.
causes resistance in the body.
Yeah.
And so it's all interconnected. It
Yes.
really is like that self-awareness, that mental health, that
Mhm.
emotional well-being, the where we put our focus. It then, because the body's always eavesdropping on the mind, it has an impact.
Yes. Yes, it does. And I think that that is probably one of the areas that is most overlooked. Um, Especially now, we have some really, really, really good medications that help to that result in fat loss.
Mhm.
But the reason they work is because they're addressing the cause of how fat is made.
Yeah.
How fat is made is a metabolic process.
Yes.
And stress can create that metabolic process and
Mhm.
also make it worse if it's already there.
That's right.
So even in any person, no matter who they are, if they are under stress, your body will take what you eat in the face of and in the environment where there's cortisol, our stress hormone, it will shift it towards making fat rather than sending
Mhm.
it to muscle to make fuel. And
Mhm.
that is just a physiologic fact, and it
Mhm.
has nothing to do with thinness, being overweight or being thin or being obese or having obesity or any of the above. Is simply what happens in our body. So, which is why I say weight health and weight care,
Mhm.
because there are people who on a scale and based on our measurements in medicine
Mhm.
are considered a healthy weight. Well,
Mhm.
when that weight is concentrated around their middle, then it's not healthy.
Right.
Where our fat is distributed in our body changes what our health parameters are.
Mhm.
And so I don't, you know, tell people, well, because you're I'm sorry, but on a scale, you're what we say your normal weight, I can't
Right.
help you.
Right.
No, if there's been a shift
Mhm.
in, so it's health. And so
Right.
that's why I tend not to, I don't like focusing on a scale too much,
Right.
because there are a lot of times where there are health shifts, health
Mhm.
improvements, and health deterioration
Yeah.
that do not manifest in numbers on a scale, but it will manifest, say, in circumference of one's waist, for example.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is and so we need to focus on things beyond the scale.
Yes, and when you talk about care,
Mhm,
it's like there's that self-care, and it makes the
mhm,
case for things like making sure that you get a good night's sleep every night,
Mhm.
whatever, how many hours that is for you based on where you are and
Yep.
like how the age range. Some
Yeah.
people like I used to be a 8.5 hour and now I'm a seven solid hour. I'm good, right?
Okay.
I couldn't function at 6 hours, but now I can function at 6.5, but I
Yeah.
like seven,
Yeah.
and it's a
I
miracle
understand.
if I get eight, right? Or like, having fun, like
Mhm.
connecting with people, and getting that oxytocin hormone going, or
Mhm.
like meditating. I put at least 15 minutes, most days 20 to 30 minutes, but I
Mhm.
block that time. I recently in the last 6 months, like really started meditating, 4 or
Mhm.
5 days a week. But I need that to break up my day. So whatever
Yeah.
that looks like for others, exercise, if that's I
Mhm.
martial arts is like a stress reliever. I mean, it's physical, but it's also for me, it's like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go and punch a bag,"
Oh, yeah. Oh,
After all
yeah.
that
We
I've dealt
need
with in the
movement.
day, I need to let off some
Exactly.
steam. So,
Mhm.
like that care piece, that self-care piece is so important, and it
Mhm.
gives people their own structure to
Mhm.
go and to create a lifestyle
Mhm.
that is supporting what you're doing on the outside.
Mhm. Yes. And the reason self-awareness is so important in that is, 1, understanding what you need,
Mhm.
providing that for yourself, and also being very aware. It helps you become very aware of who's blocking it,
Oof, that
because
part.
often it's not in the form of, "I don't want you to lose weight because then you might be more attractive than I want you to be, and you might leave me." I've
Right.
actually heard spouses say that.
True story.
Stop helping my wife lose weight because she's gonna leave me if she gets thin."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, behave yourself," and she won't.
Mm.
But that's another story. But the other but truly, I mean, all joking aside, but often what happens is they won't necessarily say, "I don't want you to be thin," but what it will be is, you're on in a nice routine of
Mhm.
working out every single day, and they'll throw a wrench into your time.
Mhm.
And it could even be, "Let's take a trip somewhere."
Mhm.
And then when you get on that trip, you're on vacation. Why are you exercising on
Yeah.
vacation? So then you get this connection between not exercising and relaxation. And so
Mhm.
that message gets transferred back home when you come back home.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of different ways that things manifest. And so I feel like it's my job to point them out
Yeah.
when I see it
Yeah.
happen. Or in my case, I don't like attention. I don't like when people notice me when I'm walking down the street. I don't mind if it's for, if I'm speaking and I put
Mhm.
myself in a position where I'm speaking and someone says, "Okay, I'm listening to you." But
Yeah.
just to be walking through a store and someone to look at me or say, "You look nice," or whatever, I don't like it.
Mhm.
As I started losing weight, that started happening because in this society, the smaller
Yeah.
you are, the more attention you get.
Right.
And so I immediately started sabotaging myself.
Mm.
Until I recognized what I was doing, and I realized it was simply because I didn't like the attention, and
Mhm.
so I was making sure that I wouldn't get it, and
Mm.
I see that often. So I walk the other thing I look for is, you know, when someone starts showing success based on what they told me their success was being measured by,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden their behaviors change, then we have to delve into what are you afraid of?
Right.
Where's the fear? Why? And so it's more than again, more than just numbers on a scale.
Absolutely. And that's when those traumas begin to surface as
Yes.
well.
Mhm,
Oftentimes, when we start to get close to those, especially when we're talking about things like health and weight and
mhm,
physical goals, and you start to, it can bring up old trauma,
yeah,
and then that's where the sabotage can jump in.
mhm,
I think you are also spot on about others. It could be family, could be spouses,
mhm,
particularly even friends
yeah,
when you start to, not only when you start to look different, but when you start to feel different and you start to
mhm,
relate different,
mhm,
then those interactions begin to shift and change,
mhm,
and you're wondering, oh, well, why are people drifting away?
mhm,
And that could unconsciously lead to self-sabotage, or the person may say, oh, now you think you're something, it's like we
mhm,
call a microaggression. Yeah.
Yes.
Or you
Yes,
think
yes.
you're better than us now, or you think you're this now.
Mhm.
And those things can cause us to subconsciously sabotage in the, go back into the sort of default mode of
Mhm.
operating.
Yeah.
And so it's good to be able to notice those things that sometimes our
Mhm.
sabotage is not solely self. It
Mhm.
can involve others. And when we
Oh, yeah.
recognize it, then what do we do? What do when we
Mhm.
can name it and what do we do?
Yeah.
And so I just think the complexity to it,
Mhm.
there's not complexity necessarily to the behavior, but there's complexity thinking about all the things that play into our health and our wellness, and that can manifest itself symptomatically as weight
Mhm.
change.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And also it plays into what we feel we deserve.
Mm.
So if,
Mhm.
as we if we internalize a lot of blame and shame, then we don't expect a whole lot.
Yeah.
We don't feel like we deserve to have whatever life it is that we want
Yeah.
or to be where and when, we want. And so as we take charge of a process
Mhm.
and that kind of feeds on itself with empowerment and then it just kind of, starts this nice cycle of
Mhm.
self-awareness, self-improvement, self then empowerment and it just keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going. What happens often is that we get to a point where our values do change.
Mhm.
What was important before is not important now.
That's right.
The things that, before the goalpost shifts because,
Mhm.
the things you wanted before suddenly are just like, oh, well, I'm way beyond that now. So now I've got
Mhm.
to set a new goal.
That's right.
But this time now, the goal is I set a new goal and I know I can make that goal. And I know I deserve to get to that goal.
That's right.
It takes some time and some work to get to that point, but when
Mhm.
it does, it starts to feed on itself, gets easier and easier
Mhm.
and easier as time goes on. And also, like with anything, when you have a plan and something happens and you have to pivot and you already have a plan in place, then, as things come up, they don't have the same impact.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so, I would love for you to share, like, as the audience is listening, as the audience
Mhm.
is listening, what would be like the first step? What would be like maybe the first step to starting to shift so that they can be, being empowered around this whole thing called weight?
Okay. The first thing I would say is for empowerment purposes, gratitude journaling.
Mm.
When you get to a place where you start to notice, I use social media as a good example. Before social media, stuff would happen. We're like, oh my gosh, that happened. And we may or may not write it down. We just commit it to memory and we're like, okay, that's nice. Now, sometimes what we'll do is like, oh, I have to, I want to take a picture of that so I can post it on Facebook. Or I
Yeah.
want to do this, so I can post it here. And so we start seeing things based around the vision of this would look this way on social media.
Yeah.
And it's an impossible way to get away from because unless you
Right.
just don't have social media.
Right.
And so, or even it's just like if you have a business and you're like, oh, I could use that for advertising, or oh, I
Mhm.
could use that, for
Right.
marketing or something else.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same thing. When you start writing down the things that are beneficial, the things that are blessings, the things that you
Mhm.
notice about the day that are good, you keep looking for those things.
That's right.
And
Mhm.
when you keep looking for those things start happening.
Mm.
Becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right.
Something good's gonna happen. I need to look for things that are good so I can write down in my journal. So
Yeah.
what happens is good things just start coming at you,
Yep.
and it just keeps coming again. So one of the first things to do is to just journal. Write down good things. Start training your mind to see the good in what's
Mhm.
around you, the blessing in what's around you. You know, um, someone, will say, I I was bad this week. I went to McDonald's. Okay, what did you eat? I got a cheeseburger and a small fry and a Diet Coke. And 2 years ago, what would you have gotten if you had gone to McDonald's? A Big Mac, a large fry, and a big drink. I'm like,
How is that a problem?
I was like, "So this is where you were, this is what you did now."
Mhm.
So, by comparison, to me, it sounds like a win. Reframing things, just
Mhm.
getting people to see things for what they truly are. Yes, not so much rationalizing things.
Mhm.
There's a fine line, obviously, but just learning how to see things for what they truly are. And then once you start doing that with the world, you start turning it in on yourself.
Yes.
Every little thing starts suddenly becoming, "Oh, wow, I can do this. Oh, wow, I know I can, I feel this way. I look this way," or whatever. But all that positivity suddenly gets absorbed, and
Yeah.
then it gets redirected. It gets
Mm,
inwardly directed. And
mhm,
so all those, and then again, that changes what your your body does. Soon
mhm,
as you start being kind to yourself, our body can't tell the difference between a bully that's someone else or ourselves. So when we're kind, we have the same thing, the opposite happens.
right.
And so, it's the same. So that's really where I start people just kinda shifting their mindset
Mhm,
and trying to break some of the burden of that self-incrimination that was
mhm.
imposed by
Upon you.
society.
Mhm. I love that, and I love a good gratitude list. I mean, that's something that I started, I think it was in 2007.
Mhm,
I every year started keeping a gratitude journal. Now every year in December, I
mhm,
order my Moleskine,
mhm.
my daily calendar, and that's how long I've been doing it. So it's been
Yeah,
almost 20 years now
wow.
that and I keep all the journals because
Mhm.
it's really powerful
It
to
is.
open a journal from 5 years ago or even 1 year ago. I've got journals out from 10 years ago that I'll open, I'll be like, "Whoa, this is what was
Mhm.
going on."
Yeah,
And you can really see how far you've come. But
exactly.
you're absolutely right. One of the things it does is it just like it redirects your little reticular activating system, starts
Yep.
to move in a different direction,
Mhm,
and you really see things differently. And even if even on my hardest days,
mm,
I if I wake up, I might just be journaling. I am grateful for a good night's sleep. I
mhm.
am grateful that I woke up. I
Yep.
am grateful that for my son
Mhm.
and the hugs that he's given me today,
Yes.
and
Yep.
there's I can always find something,
Something. Mhm.
something,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
used to be back in the day when I was really struggling, like, this is like when I first started the gratitude. This was given to me by a mentor when I was going through my divorce, and it was from an ex who was in addiction at the time.
Mhm. Okay.
So I did Al-Anon. That was sort of like
Okay.
entry into personal development for me, and she told me, she was like, "Get a gratitude journal."
Yeah.
And boy, I'll tell you, some days I woke up and it was like, "I'm grateful I have 10 fingers and 10 toes. I'm grateful
Mhm.
that I have legs that I can walk on. I'm grateful that
Yeah.
I have sight, 2
Yeah.
eyes, 2 ears, hearing." Like, it was like
Mhm.
the basic. I'm
Yeah.
grateful to have gas in my car and I have
Yeah.
breakfast this morning,
Yeah.
like, it was
Yeah.
that granular. So just for
Mhm.
those who were listening, if you're having a really hard day, I mean, think of, like, it could be the
Mhm.
very simplest of the things, but it still does the exact same thing. It
Yes.
redirects the thinking. It
Mhm.
redirects the thinking. So I love that tip. I love that tool, and I really appreciate it. I know the audience will
Mhm.
appreciate that as well.
Yes.
And I think you also it's what's very important is that you said to write it down. I mean, it's
Yeah,
easy to
we
say, "Oh."
forget. We
Yeah,
don't we don't remember.
right, we
We'll
wanna
forget it or we'll rewrite history. So
yes.
even if, we'll feel it one way, and then when we think back on it, depending on how our mood is or what's going on, it actually does,
Yeah.
but I always tell people is, um, remove value from your size and the number on a scale,
Mhm,
because if when you love yourself and as your body changes, as the people around you may change, as your relationships change, as your food preferences change, you'll still feel fine.
mhm,
When we don't love ourselves and are not appreciative of who we are, it just shifts. So
mhm.
even as our weight comes down, then suddenly it becomes, I don't like my skin. It's too loose. I don't
Yeah.
like my wrinkles. I don't
Yeah.
like my gray hair. It's like it will just go from weight to something else,
Yeah.
and you won't be any more satisfied. So just appreciate, this is a body that's kept you alive. This is a body that
Mhm,
my body has given me children.
mhm,
Every single stretch mark. I was like, now would I rather have stretch marks in my children, or would I rather have no stretch marks and not have my children? Well, if I
mm,
prefer to have my children, then I need to embrace my stretch marks.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
that's essentially that kind of thinking, and it works. It truly does
It
work.
really does. It really does. Well, you know what? This has been such an amazing conversation. We could go on.
I know, I
We
know,
could talk for hours about this. We could just keep finding stuff. But you know, I just appreciate you coming on and bringing your wisdom, bringing your expertise and knowledge, and just being and spending time with me in this conversation, chatting, because it has definitely been a pleasure. Where can people in the audience who are listening find you? They're thinking, all right, I know what
Mhm,
I need to do right now. I need to reach out to
mhm.
Dr. Catherine. How can they find you?
Well, to find me and to contact me, drtoomer.com. That's drtoomer.com. And there's a contact tab in my website. And
Excellent.
I do see them and I get back. If you're looking for my information and just, tidbits and things that can help
Mhm.
to improve your health and other things, then YouTube, which is youtube.com/Dr. Toomer. And so those are probably the 2 best and I read the comments on my YouTube channel. So,
Yes.
if there's questions or things, you wanna find out, that's the place to go.
Yes. And tell us about your show.
Okay. So on Tuesday at 6 PM live, 6 PM Eastern, I have the Dr. Toomer Talks show, and it's all things health, wellness, and weight care. And I topics change every week, and I take questions at the end. So it's a Q&A and information. So and then I take suggestions for topics as well. So
Yes. And where can they listen?
oh, see, I can't. So, on my Facebook page, which is again, facebook.com/Dr. Toomer, or on blackdoctor.org, Facebook or YouTube.
Very cool. Very, very cool. We are going to have all this information, y'all, in the show notes, or if you're watching on the YouTube, in the description. We will definitely have this information available. Thank you so much again for just coming and hanging out with me and
Oh,
talking
thank you
about
for having
all
me.
things
It's been a
weight
long
and
time coming.
wellness and health. Yes, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you
So,
very much.
yes, you all go and get with Dr. Toomer. Um, this she's a real deal Holyfield, okay? So, and share this episode with a friend, a family member, a colleague, because we need to be shifting our mindset around how we view weight health and care. This is such a rich and juicy conversation. So make sure you share this episode. Remember to hit the subscribe button, because guess what? You don't want to miss another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. These are the kind of conversations we're having all the time. Okay. And finally, leave us a review. Leave us a review, because the people behind you need to know that we are giving jewels and dropping diamonds. So make sure that you leave a comment or post a review on your preferred platform. So with that, I'm going to thank you one more time. I can't thank you enough,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sharma.
Thank you.
Yes. And for the audience, thank you all for listening, because without you, there is no podcast. And so until the next time we see each other, stay empowered.